Um, Another virtual Board of Supervisors meeting. If you can all, please stand for the Pledge of Allegiance. Supervisor Tuccinelli.
Please join me in the pledge of our great flag. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you.
Is that computer not muted?
Whoa. Okay. I'd like to report out the closed sessions from last week. We had one for public employee employment that was postponed till this morning. And we had a conference with the real property negotiator, Joshua Pack, regarding the price and terms of payment for the following properties affected by State Route 4 Trail Realignment Project Phase 1. The county negotiators were Joshua Pack and Doken Engineering, was for Gregory Jordan and Nuala Jordan, trustees for the Jordan Revocable Trust, Wendell Ender and Mary L. Ender, Stephen L. Strange and Gloria Strange, trustees for the Stephen L. and Gloria Strange Revocable Trust, Scott Frazier, Edward Titus and Erlinda Titus for the Titus Revocable Living Trust, and the Tusconia Ranches LP. Thank you. There was no reportable action taken. We had a conference with labor negotiator for the designated labor negotiators, or Judy Hawkins and Shay Johnson, regarding the employee organization, Service Employees International, SEIU, the Calaveras Public Safety Employees, the Calaveras Deputy Sheriff's Association, and the Calaveras Sheriff's Management Unit. Board action, there was no reportable action taken. Okay. Today, we did have a closed session regarding the Ag Commissioner, and there is no reportable action on that. And we will have one closed session after the regular agenda, a conference with legal counsel regarding initiation of litigation, one case. Is there any public comment on the closed sessions? I'd like to recognize Annette Hughes, who is the acting clerk to the board this morning. She's on loan from the county's planning department and is very used to doing this for the Planning Commission. Welcome, Annette. There's no public comments. All right, seeing no public comments, I want to move to staff report. Are there any staff members who would like to make a comment to the board? Ms. Turner? I hear a laugh.
Sorry, I'm trying to get in. We're also in the scan room.
Oh.
Good morning, board. Rebecca Turner, Registrar of Voters. I'm here because the chair asked me to give an update on the ballot statistics. So we are at 60% turnout so far this morning. So that is a really high turnout. Roughly 1,900 voters at the vote centers, and almost 20,000 ballots have been returned already. And unless you want additional information, Marita, that's all I've got. The state overall is at almost 60% turnout. So this is a very high turnout election.
Good. Thank you. We wish you and your staff all the best today.
Yeah, and thank you, Annette, for being there. We really appreciate it.
Okay.
So I do have a question.
Oh, just a moment, Ms. Turner. Mr. Mills?
How late do you plan on working tonight?
We're hoping to be out by midnight, but you never can tell.
It's a long day. Okay.
Yeah.
Best to everybody who's working on this, and it's a monumental task at best. Appreciate the effort that everyone's putting in, including those that were working the vote centers.
Agreed. Thank you.
Thank you. Are there any other staff that have a comment they'd like to make this morning? Okay. I'd like to move to the regular agenda. Mr. Mauer, or your staff, please. Item 4 is adopt a resolution to establish a land conservation contract for Ag Preserve 378, totaling 1,465 acres for Richard, Carla, and Romy Roleri. This is 41 parcels.
Good morning, Madam Chair, members of the board. We have 3 separate Ag Preserve contracts and zoning amendment proposals before you today. Each one comes with sort of a pair, the contract itself and then the zoning amendment. And so we'll sort of discuss each one separately, but the discussion will be about both the contract and the zoning amendment associated with each proposal. And with that, I'll turn it over to Gina Cathan to make the presentation.
Yeah, but that's not this one. This is a resolution.
Gina, you're on mute.
Huh? Excuse me just a moment,
I guess that
Peter.
helps.
What did you say on number 4, Gary? It's
I have on the item is it's a public hearing.
that's for item 5. I'm
I'm
on
looking
item-
at number 4 on our agenda, and it says,
Oh, mine says a resolution. Gina, could you please clarify, is item 4 a public hearing or is it a resolution?
Well, it's a resolution that requires a public hearing.
so you need to open the public hearing.
So, number 4, even though it's a resolution, my agenda doesn't say public hearing for number 4, but it is, so I have to open it as a public hearing?
Please do.
Supervisor Callaway, if there had been some error on there, the actual establishment of a contract does not require a public hearing. As I understand it, I mean, you can correct me if I'm wrong, I think it's just the zoning amendment, but,
Well, I mean, the question is does number 4 require my opening a public hearing? Ms. Moss, does it yes or does it no? It's the resolution. Item 5 requires the public hearing.
yes, go ahead, Gina.
Even the establishment of a contract requires noticing of adjacent property owners, so I would assume that that would require a public hearing, as we've always done.
No, that's
always-
fine. I mean, I can do that. It's
It was
just that my
probably
agenda
noticed-
did not say that 4 was a public hearing,
It-
that
it-
it was just a resolution.
Gina, in your
Okay.
staff report that's been posted to the website and on our agenda under WeGov, it lists it as a public hearing. She's reading off this paper, but on the website, so I assume, because it's been posted that way and to the public that way, that it has to be now a public hearing.
Well, we were
That's fine.
assuming it was that way all along, so that's fine with us.
I'm just curious. I mean, it's no big deal, but I'm looking at the staff report, it doesn't say public hearing on mine.
I think
Okay,
because-
that's fine. I'll open it. It's not we're not dying on the vine on this puppy. Okay. So we're going
Okay.
to, let me open the public hearing on item 4 and adopt a resolution to establish the Land Conservation Ag Preserve number 378, totaling 1,468 acres for Richard Carla and Romy Roleri. This is 41 acres. Dina, did you want to proceed on this?
Yes, please. Okay, so Richard Carla and Romy Roleri filed a California Land Conservation Contract application to establish Agriculture Preserve Contract 378 for a total of 1,465.35 acres of land, comprised of 41 assessor parcels and 32 legal parcels. The ranch is located east of Shrouder Mine Road, lying north of the City of Angels, encumbering both the west and the east side of Murphy's Grade Road from south all the way from Murphy's Grade Road to State Route 4, just this side of 6 Mile Road. The property has been in agriculture production for many years. In 1996, the Roleri family planted 18.5 acres of grapes, yielding 3 tons per acre, with a gross annual income of $83,250. Additional agriculture production on the land includes 125 head of beef cattle being grazed on 34 acres of irrigated pasture, with the balance of the ranch being utilized for its dry pasture grazing. The cattle operation has a gross annual income of $1,009 and $375,000. Scott Oneto is our Calaveras County Farm Advisor. He completed a feasibility study for the subject property, primarily utilized as livestock grazing. His study estimated the land is capable of producing an annual gross income of $54.45 per acre, confirming the land's viable agriculture land. Reported annual income from production far exceeding the minimum $2,000 annual income requirement for eligibility for the agriculture preserve. CAL FIRE identifies this property of the portion of the county as being in a very high fire hazard. Maintaining this land in agriculture will minimize the exposure of people and structures to the risk of wildfires. The California Natural Diversity Database identifies the sighting of 3 protected species within a 2-mile radius of the subject property. Policies of the conservation and open space element of the general plan encourage open space for the preservation of natural resources such as wildlife habitat, in addition to the managed production of resources, which includes rangeland and agricultural lands alike. The preservation of lands for purposes of protecting wildlife habitat and agriculture production are compatible. With one established well, the property is traversed by multiple blue line streams, including Juniper Ditch, tributaries to French Gulch and Angels Creek, all of which provide a water source for the agricultural operations. The general plan designations for the property within the proposed preserve is resource production and rural residential. The resource production designation identifies lands capable and primarily used for agriculture operations, timber production, and mineral resource production, with the ag preserve zoning being consistent. The rural residential zone also finds the ag preserve zoning consistent and compatible. Finally, this application has been considered by your board-appointed Ag Advisory Committee and your Planning Commission, and they support the establishment of this contract for the Roleris. In addition, the establishment of open space contracts under the Williamson Act is categorically exempt from CEQA, and a notice of exemption has been prepared.
Okay, are there any questions? Mr. Mills, nothing? Any questions? No. Mr. Stopper, no. Are there any public comments? Ms. Hughes, there. Okay. With no public comments, I'd like to bring it back to the board for action. I will close the public hearing. Mr. Mills.
Madam Chair, I'll make the motion to approve or adopt the resolution to establish the land conservation contract and preserve.
Okay. A second, please.
Ms. Conlon, I would like to second that.
A motion by Supervisor Mills, second by Supervisor Stopper. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Passes on a 401 absent. For the record, Supervisor Garamendi will not be with us this week. Okay, thank you. I'd like to go to item 5. This is a public hearing. To adopt an ordinance approving the zoning amendment from unclassified and highway service to ag preserve for the 41 parcels and as part of the Ag Preserve and Williamson Act Contract 378 for Richard Carla and Romy Releri, and then authorize publication of a brief property description. I'd like to open the public hearing on this. Again, Gina, could you proceed, please?
Sure. Yeah. So this is the second half of the contract proposal. So now that we've established the contract for the Roleris, all of the properties included in that contract must be zoned appropriately, which is ag preserve, which obviously identifies all those parcels, all 41 of those assessor parcels as being restricted by the Williamson Act. So the recommendation is to rezone all 41, which they're referenced in the report. I'm not going to repeat each and every assessor parcel number, but all total 41 assessor parcels from the current unclassified and highway service zoning to the ag preserve zone, identifying all of those properties as being an established ag preserve under the Williamson Act.
Are there any questions from the board? Any comments on this? Are there any public comments on this item? No? All right. Seeing no public comments on this ordinance, I'd like to bring it, close the public hearing and bring it back to the board. May I have a motion on adopting the ordinance amending the zoning of the 41 assessor parcels from unclassified and highway service to ag preserve to recognize the ag preserve Williamson Act contract 378 for Richard Carla and Romy Releri?
Madam Chair, I'd like to make the motion to adopt the ordinance approving the zoning amendment.
Thank you, Supervisor Mills. And may I have a second?
I'll second, Madam Chair.
Second from Supervisor Toffenelli. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. No, opposed? Passes on a 401 absent. Thank you. Okay, let's move to item 8.
6.
That's what I said. I need some chocolate. No, thank you. Item 6. Mr. Toffenelli, is this a public hearing one too, please?
It is a public hearing.
Want to make sure I get this right.
Yes.
I know, I saw it, but I just thought I'd let Supervisor Toffenelli make sure I stay on the
Well, you were
path.
jumping to 8, so I didn't know if you were...
Yeah, well, it's one of those days. Okay, we're on item number 6. This is also a public hearing to adopt a resolution to disestablish the land conservation contract Ag Preserve 351 and establish a land conservation contract Ag Preserve 379 totaling 206 acres for Anthony and Lana Teresi. Ms. Hughes, did I pronounce that correctly? Thank you. I'd like to open the public hearing. Colleagues, do you have any questions or comments you have on this item? Gina, could you present it to us, please?
Yes. So this application is actually to add 9.94 acres to an existing preserve totaling 206.09 acres of land, which is located at 19600 Potteroff Road, approximately 3/4 of a mile north of the intersection of Jesus Maria and Baker Riley Way. Just before the establishment of Contract 351 for the Teresis, the property was impacted by the Butte Fire, destroying fences, multiple structures on the property. Since 2015, the Teresis have rebuilt their little ranch and have reported an annual income from their agriculture production exceeding the minimum $2,000 requirement. Today, their ag operation has grown and now includes 38 sheep, 5 goats, and 4 cows, which produces an average of $6,091 annually. Scott Oneto, County Farm Advisor, completed a feasibility study confirming the land is capable of producing incomes from agriculture exceeding the minimum requirements for eligibility of the ag preserve. CAL FIRE does identify this property as being in a very high fire hazard. Of course, grazing, livestock, and managing the land for optimum grazing pastures will reduce flammable vegetation. Entering the land into the ag preserve ensures long-term agriculture production and limits the land's residential development potential, thus minimizing the exposure of people and structures to the risk of wildfires. California Natural Diversity Database identifies the sighting of 2 protected species within a 2-mile radius. Policies of the conservation and open space element of the general plan encourage open space for the preservation of natural resources, such as wildlife habitat, in addition to managed production of resources, which include rangeland and agricultural land. The preservation of lands for this purpose, protecting wildlife habitat and agriculture production, are compatible. With 3 established wells, the property is traversed by Esperanza Creek, and which provides a water source for the livestock operation. Under the land's existing contract is designated by the general plan as resource production and working land, which are both consistent with the ag preserve zoning. Your Board of Supervisors appointed Ag Advisory Committee and Planning Commission both support the establishment of this new contract. The establishment of an open space contract under the Williamson Act is categorically exempt from CEQA, and a notice of exemption will be prepared.
Do the board members have any questions or comments they'd like to make on this item? Are there any public comments on the resolution to disestablish the boundary of Ag Preserve 351 and simultaneously establishing the Ag Preserve 379? Okay. Being that there's no public comments, I'd like to bring it back to the board for action and close the public hearing. May I have a motion from the board?
I'll move this item, Madam Chair.
A motion by Supervisor Tuffanelli, a second by
Second.
Supervisor Stopper. I saw his red light, so I thought, well, that's good enough for me. Second by Supervisor Stopper. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Passes on a 401 absent vote of the board. Thank you.
We need to be able to switch this red light to a green light.
I'd like to move to item 7. Again, this is a public hearing to adopt an ordinance approving the zoning amendment from unclassified and ag Preserve as part of the Ag Preserve Williamson Act Contract 379 for Anthony and Lana Teresi, and authorize the publication of the brief description. I've opened the public hearings. Gina, did you have comments? Thank you.
Yeah, just shortly. So the majority of the land already being under contract is already zoned Ag Preserve. We're only needing to zone the one 9+ acre parcel that has been added to the existing preserve. So our recommendation is to rezone APN 20-013-011 from unclassified to Ag Preserve AP, identifying this property as being under an established Ag Preserve contract.
Thank you. Are there any comments or questions from the board? Are there any comments or questions from the public? Seeing no comments or questions from the public, I want to close the public hearing and bring it back to the board for action. May I have a motion on this?
So moved, Madam Chair.
A motion from Supervisor Stopper and a second
I'll second.
from Supervisor Tuffanelli. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Passes on a 4-0, 1 absent vote. Move to item 8. And this also is a public hearing to adopt a resolution, a resolution to establish the Land Conservation Contract Ag Preserve number 380, totaling 1,087 acres for William and Dolores Arola, trustees of the Arola 2015 revocable trust dated March 5, 2015. So I'm opening the public hearing. Ms. Kavka, do you have comments you want to make on this, please?
The last and final contract is for William and Dolores Arola. They filed their California Land Conservation Contract application to establish Agriculture Preserve Contract number 380 for a total of 1,087.32 acres of land comprised of 5 assessor parcels. Formerly known as the Brower Ranch, is located approximately 1.5 miles west of the State Route 4 and 49 intersection in Angels Camp, lying approximately 1.3 miles south of State Highway 4, west of Army Corps of Engineers, New Melones Reservoir. This property has been in agriculture production for many years. Most recently, the Whittle Ranches leased the property utilizing the pastures for cattle grazing. With the expiration of their lease agreement, the Arolas will now run 100 cow-calf pair on the land, continuing to utilize the land for its quality grazing. The gross annual income from their cattle production is estimated at $45,000. Scott Oneto completed a feasibility study on the subject property. His study estimates the land is capable of producing an annual gross income of $29.70 per acre, confirming the land is viable agricultural land. Both indicate the production of this land is capable of exceeding the minimum $2,000 annual requirement for eligibility of the Ag Preserve. This, as many other properties in our county, is designated by CAL FIRE as being a very high fire hazard. Maintaining this land in agriculture will minimize the exposure of people and structures to the risk of wildfires. The California Natural Diversity Database identifies the sighting of 3 protected species within a 2-mile radius. Policies of the conservation and open space element of the general plan encourage the open space preservation of natural resources for such as obviously wildlife habitat in addition to managed production of resources, which includes rangeland and agricultural land. There is one developed spring in addition to the property being traversed by multiple blue line streams, including Thompson Creek, Brower Creek, and tributaries to Angels Creek, all of which provide water source to the livestock operation. The general plan designates this land within the proposed preserve as resource production. The resource production designation identifies those lands capable of and primarily used for agricultural operations, timber production, and or mineral resource production, with the ag preserve zoning being consistent. Finally, your Board of Supervisors appointed Ag Advisory Committee and Planning Commission both support the establishment of Contract 380 for the Arolas.
That's it. Okay, are there any questions or comments for Ms. Kaplan? Are there any public comments or questions on this item? Seeing no public, Mr. Mills? Oh, okay. Seeing no public comments, I want to bring it back to the board, close the public hearing. Gina, you've done an awesome job on these. Thank you very much.
You're welcome.
I mean, I know you're experienced, but you really do a good job. We appreciate it. May I have a motion, please? Mr. Mills?
Madam Chair, I move to adopt a resolution to establish a California Land Conservation Contract and Ag Preserve number 380.
Thank you. And a second.
I'll second.
Second from Supervisor Tuffanelli. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Passes on a 4-0, 1 absent vote. Thank you. Again, Ms. Kath, thank you very much for
Gina,
your work
good
on
job.
this.
Thank you.
Okay. Yeah,
One
we
more.
have number, pardon.
9,
Oh,
Yeah, got one more.
we have the ordinance.
got it. Okay, thank you. All right, we can go to item 9, a public hearing adopting the ordinance approving the zoning amendment and from general ag to ag preserve and recognizing the 5 properties?
Yes.
Yes, and the 5 parcels as part of the Ag Preserve and Williamson Act Contract 380 for William and Dolores Arola, and authorize the publication thereof. I want to open the public hearing. Again, Gina, please proceed.
So, again, just as before, in order to identify these properties that you just entered into an ag preserve contract, we need to zone them appropriately. And being that none of them were previously under contract, all 5 assessor parcels need to be rezoned from the current A1 general agriculture zoning to AP agriculture preserve, signifying the properties are restricted by contract under the Williamson Act.
Okay. Are there any questions or comments from the board on this? Mr. Stelper?
Just to follow up on Madam Chair's comments earlier, how fast we're going through these right now gives no justice to the amount of work that goes into them, and I just want to thank you, Gina, and the entire planning department for everything that goes into this as we move forward. Thank you.
Thank you.
And the general fund pays for their time. Huh? It's just a little editorial. Are there, if there's no questions or comments from the board, I'd like to ask if there are any public comments on this item. Thank you, Ms. Hughes. I'd like to bring it back to the board for action, close the public hearing. I'll entertain a motion, please.
Yes, Madam Chair, I'll move to adopt ordinance approving the zoning amendment.
And a second,
Second, Madam Chair.
Second from Supervisor Stopper. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Passes on a 4-0, one absent vote of the board. Again, thank you, Gina.
Thank you. Hope everyone has a great election day.
Like your scarf.
Thank you.
Thank you, members of the board.
Thank you,
Don't forget to
Mr.
vote if you haven't
Mauer.
already.
Like your scarf too, Peter.
My news.
Mr. Mauer, I appreciate your picture of Copperopolis there in the background.
Thank you. Yeah, after being criticized for not having one locally, I found a good one for Calaveras County.
Thank you. All right, we're going to move to item 10, a presentation from Mountain Valley EMS. Mr. Ald or staff, did we need to take a break for any reason?
Madam Chair, I can't see if Mr. Doyle is in the Zoom meeting. The
Yes.
presentation has been provided to the board in advance and was available for public review as well. So with that, I don't know that staff needs
Okay.
any more introduction of the item.
Okay, thank you. Let's move to item 10, a presentation from Mountain Valley EMS regarding the request for proposal for emergency medical services for certain zones within the county. Mr. Doyle, thank you. Welcome to the board.
Happy Election Day.
Yes.
Thank you for having me. I wanted to come today to...
Could you just introduce yourself
Oh,
for
I'm
the
sorry,
record?
Lance Doyle,
No.
Mountain Valley EMS Agency. I'm the Executive Director.
Thank you.
I wanted to bring an update today on our progress, rather lengthy. I think we all went on a little bit longer than we thought, but we are finally at a stage where we're ready to bring in an update to the board. So thank you, Chairperson Callaway, members of the board and staff. In 2014, the EMS agency, Mountain Valley EMS, conducted a request for proposal process resulting in a 5-year agreement with American Legion Ambulance and Ebbets Pass Fire District. Those agreements termed on June 30th, 2020, thus necessitating a need for an RFP process, request for proposals process. I'd like to briefly review the RFP development for the board, followed by both the initial RFP as well as the second revised RFP. The Mountain Valley EMS agency contracted with Endpoint EMS Consulting for assistance in the development of the initial Calaveras County request for proposals. I'm not seeing it actually. Do we have a presentation?
We have it.
Okay.
I'm assuming, Mr. Mills, do you have it? No. Do you have it? Yeah. So I'm not sure if we can get it up there. Okay, thank you.
Are you sharing it?
Well, I thought Robin was,
Okay.
but, Mr. Al,
Yes, ma'am.
we can't see the presentation up on the screen. Is there a way that you can, or?
Yeah, it will take me a moment to
Okay.
put it on the jump drive and move it.
Why don't we proceed, and
The
if,
first couple slides to review.
that's fine, well, let's just proceed, and if we can, we can.
Great. So, as I had mentioned, we had contracted with Endpoint EMS Consulting for development of the request for proposals. The principals at Endpoint EMS Consulting have over 50 years of EMS experience, both in the local EMS agency side of the business as well as at the local provider level in executive management. Endpoint came highly recommended by my EMS counterparts throughout the state, resulting in the EMS agency hiring Endpoint to conduct our request for proposals in Stanislaus County in 2019. We were very happy with their performance. We conducted a very intricate and extensive EMS system redesign in Stanislaus County. We had multiple bids. The process was run transparently and fairly, and we were able to select a provider after multiple proposals were submitted with no contest of the proposal and the award, which nowadays is a pretty big thing. RFP proposals for ground ambulance service tend to be contested on a fairly regular basis. So we're very happy with the fact that we had a very extensive proposal process, and we came through without any contestation. Throughout the process here in Stanislaus County, Endpoint and the EMS agency worked together to meet with stakeholders, meet with executive board throughout the county to develop what we felt were important components to the EMS system, as well as to discover what we're doing really well. All stakeholders were interviewed. We had multiple focus groups, and we got some very good information out of our focus groups. Some of the strengths of the current EMS system. Current system's generally performing very well. All stakeholders interviewed had positive comments regarding the current providers, as well as the system design and integration with their individual agencies. All stakeholders had made mention that they felt comfortable and confident the current contractors provided professional service and are dedicated to the citizens of Calaveras County. The clinical care provided to our citizens meets or exceeds industry standards. Both providers have extensive clinical quality assurance processes and provide education to their employees as well as the public on a regular basis. All stakeholders reiterate the strong partnerships they've developed with the current providers. All have an open line of communication with management and feel that concerns are addressed quickly and appropriately. And lastly, system stakeholders express openness to change and improvements in the current EMS delivery model. While all agreed our current EMS systems work well, we did identify some challenges within the current system that we addressed in the new request for proposals. Some of these challenges are long out-of-county transport times. Approximately 50% of the calls originating in Calaveras County get transported to a neighboring county, whether that's Tuolumne or Amador or down to the valley. A closest ambulance is not always dispatched. We don't have visibility at the dispatch level integrated into the dispatch software to necessarily know exactly where an ambulance is when they return into the county. Employee retention is always an issue in EMS and can be compounded in our rural environments just because of proximity, and generally the labor pool is a little bit smaller to choose from. Aged equipment in ambulances with no hydraulic gurneys. While both providers did have a robust replacement process and mapping, it still is an issue when you have limited revenue within the county to replace what becomes very expensive equipment. Our response zones and response times needed updating. We had a blanket 20 minutes in the north and south zone and 13 minutes in the east zone as a response time, regardless if it was, say, downtown San Andreas or up at the Alpine Calaveras county line. So we needed to update our response model. Financial sustainability is an issue in every EMS system and is only compounded in the smaller rural systems. Oh, there we go. I'm on slide 4, I believe. There we go. Thank you. Lack of consistent data for decision making. We currently relied, and when this RFP was developed, we relied on self-reporting of both clinical data as well as response time data. That was the industry standard years ago. The bar has been moved significantly towards the use of third-party verified surveillance software vendors. Dispatch radio coverage issues. Again, we're in a rural environment. The use of dispatch radios is difficult sometimes depending where in the county you are, so we have to rely on backup systems like cell phones, or as we'll see in the RFP, mobile data terminals. And then urban islands. We talked about this the last time. Again, being a rural county, there are instances where we have pockets of urban population that are far removed from other population centers. The obvious ones are Copperopolis, West Point area, Dorrington, up the hill, and those are very challenging to address. But we have some ideas and changes to the new program that might help. Next slide, please. Based on the challenges discovered through the stakeholder meetings and system analysis, a select few high-impact system enhancements have been written into the RFP. We believe these fiscally responsible enhancements will go a long way towards bringing the Calaveras EMS system in line with current industry standards. In fact, when implemented, these enhancements will provide a modern EMS system with expanded oversight that exceeds many larger urban systems. Mountain Valley EMS has developed population density-based response maps with the National Grid System Overlay, which is the current industry standard. This will allow for appropriate population density-based urban, suburban, rural, and wilderness response time standards, going away from the 20 minutes or 13 minutes within the whole zone. Calaveras County Sheriff's Office has agreed to offer its current automatic vehicle locator program access to the winning proposer. This technology, in addition to the requirements for mobile data, will allow computerized dispatch of ambulances, reducing phone time for Sheriff's Department dispatchers, allow for the closest unit to be dispatched, and enable the responding ambulance crew to see any dispatch notes prior to arrival, thus streamlining the dispatch process. This will also help address some of the communication and radio issues we see within the county. Mountain Valley is requiring participation in the First Watch online compliance utility and First Pass clinical surveillance with the new EMS contracts. This allows for third-party verified compliance and clinical reporting. This is the industry standard now. Okay. Copperopolis Fire Protection District has committed to continue to provide paramedic level first response within its fire district, and we encourage any proposers to develop a fee-for-service response agreement with this and possibly other future advanced life support fire agencies, specifically those agencies that serve these urban islands which we talked about. The agreement resulting from this RFP is a 5-year term with the option to extend for an additional 5 years. We believe a long-term contract is, first of all, the standard within the EMS industry, but encourages investment by the winning provider into the system, both in terms of equipment and possibly stations, posting areas, things like that, land. Okay, so to bring us up to speed, next slide, please. Early this year, as we all know, Mountain Valley conducted an initial RFP process for all 3 exclusive operating areas within the county. That would be the north, the south, and the east zones. That process resulted in 1 qualified proposer for the east zone with subsequent award and contracting. That provider, as we know, is Ebbets Pass Fire District, and they began service under the new agreement on July 1st of this year. That same process resulted in 1 letter of intent to bid for the north and south zones, however, did not result in a qualified proposal. As is standard industry practice, Endpoint Consulting EMS conducted debriefs with the non-responsive interested party in order to identify reasons the party did not submit a proposal. The county leadership group was then reconvened in order to develop a strategy for the north and south zones, which resulted in a revised RFP as well as a contract extension with the current ambulance provider in order for us to conduct this process. There are 5 key high-impact revisions to the first RFP to bring us into where we are today with the second RFP. We revised the response zone mapping to more accurately reflect the urban, suburban, rural, and wilderness boundaries. We were able to find new GIS mapping that allowed us to drill down much closer than the original mapping, which gave us much more accurate boundaries around each population density zone. Suburban and rural response times were amended due to these mapping changes. 2 minutes were added to urban responses, allowing proposers to meet response times in the south zone as well as the far east areas of Valley Springs. Okay, with the new mapping, again, because we were able to zoom in much closer, we realized that the initial response times in the first RFP, based on where it made most sense to post your ambulances, we would not make those response times in some of those outlying areas, and thus setting up the provider for failure and significant fines. Response times for the proposed ALS fire first responses in Copperopolis was decreased by 2 minutes in all of the zones. In discussions with Copper Fire, we realized that we could actually shorten the response time within their response area, allowing them a comfortable amount of time to make it to those calls. All of these response times are still 6 minutes shorter than the current 20-minute response time. Even after our modifications, in the urban areas, the response times are still 6 minutes shorter. This change for proposers to meet response time standard, this allows them to meet those standards, as we already discussed, from where it makes sense for them to post an ambulance. We increased the ambulance mileage limit from 250 to 300,000 miles, again, because 50% roughly of our transports go out of county. Our ambulances put on miles very quickly. The liquidated damages or response time fines for response time non-compliance were reduced, bringing them in line with our other rural contracts within the Mountain Valley region. And then lastly, we provided clarifying language regarding the cost and structure of the Encouraged First Responder program in Copperopolis. There was some concerns about how we had written the original wording around the Copper Fire First Responder Agreement, so we made some clarifying changes to that. Next slide, please. This is the new response time matrix. Again, urban code 3 responses were increased by 2 minutes, and then the first responder agreement for Copper, those urban response times were actually decreased by 2 minutes. Next slide, please. So some milestones. The revised request for proposals for the north and south zone was released on June 12th after a couple month delay due to the COVID pandemic. We were prepared to release earlier, but in speaking with my counterparts throughout the state and then multiple providers, it was determined that it was probably not the right time to release the RFP, and we probably would not have been successful in receiving any proposals. So we delayed it by a few months. The agency received 4 letters of intent to submit proposals by the July 8th deadline. Proposals were due on October 19th, where we received 2 qualified proposals. Proposals were reviewed for minimum qualifications by the EMS agency, and both were forwarded to the Proposal Review Committee on October 20th. Oral presentations were conducted last Friday on October 30th by both proposers. So I'd like to talk about the Proposal Review Committee and process here just for a minute. The 2 qualified proposals were reviewed and scored by experienced, independent, highly qualified review committee consisting of we had 5 members, One is a current fire warden and former EMS administrator. One is a former EMS agency and current fire-based medical director. We had a current rural public health officer. We had a current trauma program manager with extensive EMS experience. And then we had a current EMS administrator. So a pretty wide collection of expertise, very similar to the structure we used in the Stanislaus County proposal review. The financial review was conducted by a certified public accountant experienced in request for proposal, financial analysis, EMS financial modeling, and EMS economics. We've used this individual now multiple times for EMS, for RFP financial analysis, as well as some of the applications we receive for non-emergency transport. Lastly, no member of the Policy Review Committee works or resides within Calaveras County. None have an affiliation with Mountain Valley or a conflict of interest with either provider that submitted proposals. Next slide, please. Both proposals were reviewed and scored independently by each committee member. After reviewing members' scores were sent to Mountain Valley for initial tabulation. On October 30th, each proposer was allowed 1 hour for an oral presentation to the the Proposal Review Committee, after which time the committee members were allowed time to ask questions. Committee members were given time to finalize their scores, after which a recommendation for award was made to the Mountain Valley EMS Executive Director. After receipt of the recommendation, Mountain Valley will notice the intent to award, and the JPA board will then approve the final award. So that's the process we went to. Next slide, please. This is a sample of the scoring matrix. Each proposal was scored on, I believe it's 11 different categories. This was contained in the RFP, so each proposer had access to this and knew how they were going to be scored. Next slide, please. So where do we go from here? After recommendation from the Proposal Review Committee, the agency is scheduled to notice of intent to award on November 6th, Friday of this week. Award approval by the Mountain Valley JPA Board is scheduled for a special meeting on November 16th, and then contract negotiations will commence immediately afterwards with implementation of the new contract on June 1st, 2021. And lastly, thank you for your time. I can answer questions. Unfortunately, I'm unable to discuss specific elements of any individual proposal as we are still in the procurement process. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Doyle. Mr. Mills?
Yes, this has been a long, arduous affair for a lot of people. And a lot of effort has been put in to try to find what is the most common ground or the best way to do this. And I'm sure that there will be some discussions about better ways in the future. Whoever gets awarded the contract, will they be able to start implementing earlier than the June 1 deadline? Or do they need to just simply be putting themselves together for that time?
No, so they can prepare, there's elements within the RFP that will take some investment, some purchasing of equipment. And they can start that as soon as they're awarded, or most likely once the contract is signed, but the service does not begin until June 1st. Okay. We have a current extension with the current provider through May 31st.
I just wanted that question out there for clarity, be sure everybody understood it. Again, appreciate so much all of even the reviews that had taken place on this, especially with Endpoint and their expertise in helping to try to find those areas that we might be able to make some improvements or changes on. And hopefully, it will result in a better delivery system for us in the county here in the future. I'm like thinking 5 years, but I'm thinking more 10. So let's get this over with and let's move on.
Mr. Tuffanelli, you're also on the EMS board. Do you have any questions or comments as a...
No, I don't. It's been, Dennis is correct, it's been a long time. I do have a question on the review committee, though. You made a statement that none of these members, the 5 members that were on that committee, had anything to do with Mountain Valley EMS or had business or lived in Calaveras County?
No, I believe so. There's no Mountain Valley employees that are on the policy review committee. There's nobody that's on the review committee that has a current affiliation. I'm thinking specifically medical director because they're under contract. As far as living in Calaveras County, I don't believe any of them live in Calaveras County.
Okay.
We worked really hard to make it an independent third party. We did replace one person as we worked through the process, again, just for transparency and making sure we had an impartial committee.
And the CPA was completely separate from any Mountain Valley?
Yes.
Okay.
So the CPA was, we pulled out the financial analysis from the policy review committee, and we sent that to the CPA to score independently of the policy review committee.
One other question, was the oral presentations on October 30th, last Friday, was that open to the public?
No, it's not a public.
It's not? Okay, I just wanted to clarify.
Yes. The policy review committee was there, Endpoint Communications was there to facilitate, and then I was there as an observer with no input.
Thank you.
Mr. Stopper?
You brought up the current providers has an extension going through May 31st, potentially giving an opening for June 1st. Is there an opportunity for that provider to back out of that extension in any way?
The only opportunity to back out well, there would be normal notice, which I would need to look in the contract, but I believe it's 90 days.
90 days?
I believe. I would have to get back to you on that.
That's good to know.
However, there are the only additional mechanism to get out of the contract is, so backing up, when we extended the original contract, the state, who has to approve all of these processes, did not allow us to extend the exclusive operating area. So as soon as we went to an extension, which would have been July 1st, this became an open operating area, which means if we as the EMS agency received an application from another ambulance provider, and they qualified and wanted to do business in Calaveras County, that would be allowable. And what would generally happen is you would split the calls. So one would go to the current provider, one would go to the other provider, and back and forth. What that does in effect is cuts the number of calls as well as the revenue in half for the county. It was requested, and I thought it was a reasonable request, as did our board, that there was language in there that if a provider during the extension period only, if another provider was brought into the county and it had a negative financial impact on the current provider, that they could serve notice.
Okay, I think that's explained better than I understood it prior. So at the point where if it's financially viable, they will proceed.
Absolutely.
But if another, let's say, for instance, a different provider were brought in on the RFP and weren't to start till the June 1st, then they wouldn't be splitting the cost, and then there is no legal way they could back out of that until June 1st, as long as the other provider wasn't providing.
Yes.
Okay.
So let me back up.
Understood.
Any provider that would start prior to June 1st would need to apply and be approved through us,
Right.
which that process takes some time. We're really addressing that gap.
Right.
Yeah.
No, excellent. That's a very good explanation. I appreciate that.
Okay, and I did have, as a side note, I've had multiple conversations with the current provider who's expressed zero intent in going anywhere. I understand, he just needed a way to reevaluate if all of a sudden his business is cutting out.
Understood.
I had conversations with the current provider, and he did tell me that they had no intent of pulling out of Calaveras County. They fully intended to honor this contract extension.
Couple other things, just so for some questions for clarity here. You have on your strengths here, system stakeholders are open to system changes to improve the system. And then we go on to challenges and response zones and times. You made response zones and times needed updating because of the actual gap in the ability to respond in certain zones, or vice versa. You're able to get there quicker in Copperopolis area, for example. And then you went on to the RFP system enhancements. I'm just, the ambulance response time slide, a little bit hard time following. I mean, you did, so let's just simplify it. The Copperopolis area, you were able to bring it down by 2 minutes. You said the rest of the areas you brought up in the urban areas by 2 minutes. But we also have rural, suburban, and wilderness areas. I mean, I understand the wilderness, it's certain areas, some of the roads in Calaveras County as soon as possible is understandable. Having lived out some of those roads in the past. But the rural response times, are significant. 27 minutes, 37 minutes. I'm trying to follow this graph you have here, and excuse me, I just having a hard time understanding it. So could you explain it to me?
Absolutely. So let's cover the without an ALS first response first. Okay, this is 95% of the county, right? Everywhere but Copperopolis, right? So, and I'm going to use the Highway 4 as an example because that's where I live, and I can speak offhand. So we have an urban area, which is high population density, let's say downtown Arnold, okay? That has a 13-minute and 59-second response time. So anywhere within that urban area, the responder has to be there within that time frame, okay? And then we, let's say, go up Highway 4 a little bit, and we have population densities drop, and that would be a suburban area. That's usually the outskirts of, say, your urban, okay? Like, let's say, the outskirts between Angels Camp and San Andreas. And I apologize, I should have brought a map. It might have been more helpful. I can email you the map as well. Those have a little bit longer response time because we can't post ambulances in places that don't have a lot of calls because that's just doesn't really make sense, right?
Cost benefit.
Yeah. And then we have, so if we kept going further up Highway 4, then we get into the rural area, okay, which again has, I want to say, less than 50, might be 30 population per square mile, okay? Takes longer to get there, down dirt roads, things like that. And then we have the wilderness, right? Which if we use the Highway 4 example, is pretty much anything up towards the county line before we get to Bear Valley. And that's your best effort. Most of the time, or a lot of the time, especially in this county, you're having to go off the road. We all know.
Let me break down my question a little farther. So you have 3 segments here. I understand going down that, and that makes perfect sense, but we go to ALS Fire First Responder Agreement, and that time is reduced significantly. And then we go to ambulance with fire agreement, and then the time goes up considerably. So that's where I'm looking.
Perfect. So this is a system that we built and implemented in Stanislaus County, where we, in more urban areas, you can't financially put a ambulance on every street corner like we used to. The financial model just doesn't work. So our philosophy is we need to look at EMS as an integrated system. We brought fire in. We have paramedic level fire departments as well as EMT level fire departments. We brought them into the response model and made them contractually responsible for a response time, which is one of the first times that's happened, right? They agreed to, okay, I can get to a call in urban area in 7 minutes. Great. You're there with a paramedic in 7 minutes. We met with our medical director and said, okay, if I have a paramedic on scene, they can't transport, but they're on scene in 7 minutes, how much longer are you comfortable before we have a transporting unit there? And his answer was, in the urban areas in Modesto, 4 minutes, right? So we have a patient receiving paramedic level care, the same care they would have gotten with an ambulance, and that just gives the ambulance a little bit more time to get there to help with distributing their ambulances throughout the system a little bit better. So we took that model to Calaveras Fire, who had indicated that, yeah, we'd love to be able to get a little compensation and, more importantly, be part of the EMS system. So I met with Joel and the chief down there when we first developed the first RFP and said, okay, let's look at the response area. What's your comfort level with a response time? How quickly can you get to the calls in the majority of your area? And I believe at the time they threw out 8 or 9 minutes maybe. So the first RFP we wrote in, I think we gave them 11:59, which was still much quicker than the 20 minutes that is in the current agreement. And again, the same philosophy. We already have a paramedic doing all of the ALS stuff with the patient, and it gives the ambulance the ability to get to that call and still be compliant and not accrue fines, because it's just not economically realistic to put a full-time ambulance in, again, we're talking about copper, in copper. So we're sharing that response, if you will, with the fire department. So in the subsequent response model, we brought that down to 10 minutes again, which is very reasonable.
Much better. It's much clearer to me now. Thank you.
Mr. Mills?
Lance, I'd like to just add to what you just said too, is Copperopolis, those people are paying through Measure C for the additional benefit of having paramedics in their fire system. They paid to some degree a lot of cash for that. So the only thing that they don't do right now is transport. That's literally where their hang up is. But that's their option to do that. They can make that application and change that if they want to do that. They haven't decided they wanted to. So it's a unique bird. I'm sure throughout your whole system it's a unique bird because of the way it's financed.
Well, but we encourage the higher, in these rural areas, I mean, it's great to have ALS or even advanced EMT first responders, because it's just the economics don't allow you to get there as quickly in every case.
And I know what would be helpful, have been helpful in this conversation would have been a map.
Yes.
To actually show all those little squares and show exactly what those time windows were for those squares, and identifying truly what is urban and rural, and how does that fit.
And I'll share that with this board as soon as I
Yeah,
get back.
it's a very, very good map, and I know you spent a lot of time putting that together, so it helped to explain.
Personally, we have a GIS guy now.
Yeah, but it's a very helpful tool to understanding what the challenges are regarding the time windows and the response times that have been created and why they're created the way they are. So I just wanted to make the point.
One point of clarification on this response time. This really applies if we have a non-fire-based proposer, right? The fire-based proposer can propose however they want.
Understood.
And they could utilize the same thing.
Knowing that, we got a couple different people putting in for the RFP process, and with Copperopolis being its own bird, the understanding is paramedics are or high-level EMTs at other departments aren't necessarily able to do what they're educated to do unless you license them through your JPA.
So the short answer is yes. The way that works is, and I'll just use my personal example. I've worked up at Bear Valley, used to work up at Bear Valley for many years in the paramedic, or in the medic room. I'm a paramedic, but I am only allowed to work at an EMT level of scope because Bear Valley is not an ALS approved provider. So we'll take that to pick a fire agency, well, Copper Fire. They said we want to be an ALS, we want our paramedics who might work elsewhere to be able to be a paramedic when they're here. Fantastic. We need to make the whole department an ALS approved provider. And we can do that in baby steps. We don't have to do the whole department. In Stanislaus County, we have one that has 3 stations, and they're going to start with 1. And then hopefully they can go to 2 and go to 3. But the department needs to be an ALS provider.
Right. So there's that possible opportunity in the future, even without the measure that Copperopolis has, that other departments could possibly come in underneath that umbrella?
Absolutely. We encourage that. And that's one of the, I know Supervisor Garamendi's not here, but that was one of his concerns early on in the process is how can we improve service to these urban islands?
Right.
Because we have other ways as we get into working with whomever the provider might be of grants and things like that, where we might be able to push some of the higher level of care closer out to those areas.
And the reason I bring this up, and it's been related by other people in the room, is in the past there's instances where we'll just call it a perfect storm. All the ambulances are busy with one situation or another. We have a fire crew on scene, and their hands are tied to the level of their ability to provide a service that they may be educated on, but can't do it legally. So that's why I was going down that question route.
And we can talk offline. There's been a lot of changes in the last 5 years to bring that level of service with the advanced EMT, even the basic EMT with the more treatments they're allowed to use now and medications, to bring that a lot closer. And we can have an offline conversation about that.
Thank you, sir.
Mr. Tuffanelli.
Well, I think we're missing a little bit of the point here. You're absolutely correct. I don't disagree with anything you said, with the exception that Copper is allowed to do what they're doing because they have a contract with the current provider. The current provider, when we have a contract starting June 1st, has all-inclusive of the area. There's a contract that they can sign, which they do with Copper, to allow them to not transport but use their paramedics. Simply if all the firehouses come under ALS and have qualified paramedics, they can't just go out and start doing it. They have to be in a contract with ALA to be able to provide that service. Well, with us, but still, that has to be done. Not just going out and qualifying everybody. So,
thanks for the explanation, Gary. I appreciate it.
Mr. Mills.
As an agency, we are very supportive of that. Again, we have a hybrid model in Stanislaus County. That is one of, I want to say, very few in the state where we have actually integrated fire into the EMS side of things. So we are very open to that.
Mr. Mills.
The key point too, and you haven't really touched on it, but I wanted to clarify it, is that if you're a paramedic or an advanced EMT, if you don't have the gear around you, you really can't practice at your level. You practice to the level to which the gear is available to you to do it. So that means that having that license or that approval from Mountain Valley or whatever means nothing as a paramedic if you don't have the stuff to work with. That's a key component here. So it's great to put all of these people and give them licenses, but if you can't put the gear next to the person, it means nothing.
and one other point, if that happens, and it could possibly happen, hasn't happened yet other than Copper, and you can correct me, Lance, if I'm wrong, if you go down that road and you end up with the contract, you'll have to provide a paramedic 24/7. So it's not just hiring one paramedic. You have to have at least a minimum of 3 and possibly 4 to cover in case they're sick or what have you. So it's kind of a big envelope that you're talking about here, as far as funding wise.
There's a lot more dynamics to it than initially on paper.
Correct.
Right.
Thank you, Lance.
Mr. Doyle, could you please explain to me what LastPass is?
First
That-
pass?
I mean, First Pass. LastPass, I use LastPass. I mean,
We
First
got the
Pass.
discounted version of LastPass, right?
Oh.
So, First Pass, as well as the compliance utility, those are software packages developed by a company called FirstWatch. FirstWatch is the industry-leading surveillance software provider within the country for sure, and I know they do international business. So what they do is, if we think of 2 different goals that we're using them for. One of them is to monitor the compliance, right? Are the ambulances or fire engines getting to the scene in the time that we've put in the contract? Okay, so we integrate into the dispatch software, and it just runs behind the scenes. No one even knows it's there, and that allows us to pull data into our software platform to show all of the calls and the compliance, right? So we don't have to rely on the provider saying, okay, I made all my calls this month 93% of the time, right? We have the raw data. We can do that, and it's third-party verified. So that's the online compliance utility. We've been using that in Stanislaus County, I want to say 7 years now. We are integrated now into Calaveras County, and we are actually doing training this week with the 2 current providers for the compliance monitoring side. So we're going to be live, which is a huge milestone. It's taken years to get us there. We'll be live with the third-party verified compliance monitoring. We're going live now. Now, the other side of that is what's called First Pass, and that's the clinical monitoring side. So this company now has built modules where you can look at the clinical operations of your paramedics and EMTs in the field, because now we upload all of the patient care record data into their database. So we can set up, with our medical director, can set up, let's just say we wanted to look at aspirin administration for chest pain, which is part of our protocol. We can set up a query, and it will monitor real time if we're giving aspirin during a chest pain call. And not only does it allow us to print a report at the end of a period, week, month, what have you, but it will monitor real time. So if we have a call, a chest pain call, that there was no aspirin given, and we have it set up this way, it will ding our clinical person or our medical director and say, hey, this paramedic just ran a call and they didn't give aspirin. Do you want to look at it? So it allows us to see and monitor what's going on in the field. And this also is passed through to the providers, because the providers are contractually obligated to participate. So now their clinical people will have access to their own dashboard, if you will, and it helps with their quality improvement.
So, having remembered some of the ambulance timing, when you say there's 13 or 14 minutes or whatever on one of those, but the reality becomes at a certain point that that's not achievable, how are you managing that now? How's CMS managing that now? Because they are fined if they don't, but I remember they were having trouble getting to Glencoe or Gans Meadow or somewhere, and they couldn't meet those times, so you would have to modify that? So where's that nexus?
So, yes and no. Under the old agreement, it was very difficult to monitor because, again, it was all self-reported data. We just don't have the reporting built into a spreadsheet, right? To really, I mean, you can do just simple, reporting off a spreadsheet, but how valid is that data? Years ago, the agency went to only validated data, and every decision we make now is based on data, but we know it's good data, right? So to answer your question, a couple things. One, we have what are called exemptions. So let's just use Gans Meadow, for instance. And I believe Gans is a wilderness response, but let's just for sake of argument say it's a rural response, where you have to be there in 29:59, okay? And normally, that's not a problem. But now we're in the middle of a snowstorm, and it takes me 40 minutes to get there. Well, we have an exemption that the provider can submit and say, it was snowing that day, you just can't make the call, and that's reasonable. So we just pull that call out of the OCU. But if we have habitual, where Gans Meadow, your example, and that provider is there habitually at 35, 40 minutes, well, it gives us the opportunity to, one, is that just not a realistic response time? Or two, are there operational issues we can look at to help that, right? Do we need to staff Dorrington? Because Dorrington's 15 minutes closer, right? So it allows us to drill down, but ultimately the provider has signed an agreement to meet those response times, and there's penalties associated, and ultimately there's breach language if we get that far down the road. If they just can't meet what we all think are reasonable response times, they're just not willing to do what it takes to make those response times.
Thank you.
There's multiple steps we can take to address.
The JPA board looks at response times semi-annually. Usually there's a report given to us in June and December, whatever. And we actually go through all of them, make sure they conform.
And we can, as a side note, we can work, if it's the pleasure of this board, I can supply that data, I can present it, we can put it in the consent calendar, whatever you like.
No, we have representatives. Nope,
Okay.
not interested in going down that, I'm not. Mr. Mills, did you have something?
Yeah, I listen to the medics on the conversation with dispatch, and you know that they're not oftentimes aware of where a particular car is in the system. But I also know in private business 10 years ago, I could watch my vehicles working in Lancaster and Palmdale sitting in an office in Stockton or even here. I would love the system to get to the point where don't mess with my dots kind of thing, that you know exactly where those cars are and whether or not they're actually going to something or coming from something. That's going to be a key component in the future to the success of the system here locally, and I would really encourage everyone to start, since it's already a proven technology and it's done seamlessly using AT&T or any of the wireless formats, that we start thinking about how we're going to do that and be aware of where those cars are. It's tough with the amount of out-of-county transports that we're doing, and we're doing a lot. I listen to sometimes where, you got 3 medics gone. That's huge when you're talking about the amount of area that we work. So maybe it's a case of staging the transports because this one's out but coming back, and now we can start shipping something else. But we can't do that right now because our dispatchers are somewhat blind. They know that somebody went, but they don't know when they're back in across the line and able to be responsive to another dispatch. So I just wanted to bring that up. I think it's got to be looked at as a valuable tool.
So I swear I didn't plant that question, and I glossed over it in here. So as part of you're trying to make me look good today, huh? Thank you, I appreciate it. As part of the RFP, the winning proposer, and we've already done this with Evans Pass, is obligated to invest in technology called, it's all based off of GPS, automatic vehicle locator, and we took it a step further with mobile data terminals. So what that's going to do is exactly what Supervisor Mills had mentioned, is they will be on, every unit will be in dispatch's screen, and then in each individual mobile data terminal, they're going to see where the units are, but more importantly, they will be tracked. So instead of relying on, I'm just going to pick Ebbets Pass again, coming back up from Sonora, and when they hit the county line, getting on the radio and say, back in the county, available on road, okay, well, where are you? Are you at the bridge, or are you in Murphy's? That's a lot of area. Now we'll be able to track those, and dispatch will now be able to dispatch the closest unit and dispatch that through their terminal. Again, to help address the communications issues we have in the county because of terrain with the radio, right? So now we have another backup method of dispatching aside from the radio. And then taking that a step further, the mobile data terminal will allow all of the dispatch information to be downloaded immediately to the computer in the ambulance with address and all of that, and then also any notes that are put in by the dispatcher. Like they might not want to go on the air with some kind of a safety type note, but they can type it in and it's right there. So it's going to be more efficient for the dispatchers, and it's going to be more accurate for the providers.
Well, I have to say, it's pretty impressive where you are now as an agency. Are there any questions or comments from the board? Are there any public comments on this presentation? Hearing no public comments, just come back to the board. Mr. Doyle, thank you very much. I know I appreciate it, having seen where you were and where you are today. Mr. Tuffanelli?
I do have one question, and I've been asked. The November 6th notice of intent,
Yes.
is that a public?
Yes.
You announced that publicly?
Yes.
And that will be,
posted to our website.
pardon me?
It will be posted to our website.
To our website? Okay. And can you give the address of the website publicly right now?
MVEMSA.org, I believe.
Yeah,
Thank
that sounds correct.
It will be in, so we have a whole, we're calling it a portal, but it's not really a portal. We have a page that has everything RFP related to it. You just hit that page and it'll be right there, the intent to work. And we'll also email the proposers, so they will have it.
Okay, and
And I'll send that to you as well, so you aren't blind.
yeah, if you could send that to me and this board, all the board,
I will.
that would be
Yes.
great.
I'll send it to you before we post it.
Thank you.
Yes.
Thank you.
Sorry, I forgot about it.
And I've got to make sure, I got to look,
You guys in the loop.
I got to relook at your contract. I thought it was in there that you had to know immediately the website address. So
I don't even know the phone number down there. It's just speed dial.
thank you, Lance. Thanks for your presentation. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Mr. Doyle, appreciate it. All right, I'd like to ask, are the supervisors have any comments they would like to make on anything? Mr. Stopper?
Just doesn't matter where you're at, who you are, get out and vote. Let your voice be heard. It's an important day.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Mills?
Yes, Natural Bridge has been reopened with specific restrictions, and I attended the two-care conference over the one in Sonora the other day on forest health and fuel reduction projects. Very informative.
Where did you go? Or was it
Fairgrounds.
just, huh?
It's fairgrounds.
Oh, it wasn't a field trip?
No, ma'am. No, it was at the fairgrounds. We had various speakers come and explain where they were and how they were in the working in the process, federal as well as local.
Thank you. Mr. Tuffanelli?
I don't have anything to report. Well, I do. I have a COG meeting tomorrow, 5:30.
We do?
So does Dennis.
A COG
Yeah.
meeting?
A COG.
Oh, Okay.
It's a Zoom COG meeting. And I just want to say, good job, Madam Chair, you did a great job today.
Could you please make sure that's recorded? Okay. We are going back into closed session. We had a closed session today of the public employee employment with the County Ag Commissioner on Weights and Measures. Item 2 of the closed session we will not be having, we will be doing that at a later date. There was nothing to report on that. And on item 3, we'll have a conference with legal counsel, initiation of litigation, 1 case. Are there any public comments on the closed session? This board's going to adjourn to closed session. Ms. Hughes, thank you very much for today. You're welcome back. Thank you. We appreciate it and thank the planning department for lending you to us. We'll remember that at budget time. Okay. Yes, we will take a 5-minute break. Okay.